Okay, welcome back to the third video. Now, in this video, in the previous video, we created the helper class, but that's not enough. You need to create the tables that you're actually going to use in your application. We have a table called members. So where do we create the table? We go back to the application. And remember, where do we create the table? We create the table, the onCreate method helper class. So here's my helper class. My helper class, we have an onCreate method, and this is where we need to create the table. How do we create the table? We use normal SQL statements to create the table. If you don't know how to do that, you can go and check SQL syntax to create the table. But it's a simple, just SQL create table SQL, and just any table, any website. So basically you create the table name, and then the fields that you put in here. The column name, the data type, the column name, the data type. So we're going to construct this ourselves. I'm going to construct this and then execute this statement from in the onCreate method. So how do we construct this? First, I'm going to do something similar to this. I'm going to define my field. Why do I define my fields here? Because I know I don't have to remember. I don't make typos in the field names in the data that comes from the database. So I can always go back here and check what the names are. And I just simply use the variable name. All right. So I don't need to do the, I could, keep typing it over and over again. It could cause you a problem. So I've done that already. And then I'll explain to you what we've done. And so I have these constant variables. And actually, I need the table name. So let's go back to the main activity, go back above and the helper class, and then I will paste those information here. This one is already defined above, so I don't need it. So what do we have here? What we have here, we have the table name. I define a constant that represents the table name. It's called members. I defined a field name, a column name is called ID, a column name called name, a column name called age, a column name called city. But those are my constant that represent that. Why is that important? Those are important because when I construct my SQL statements, whether it is update, whether it is insert, I can use these constant instead of these field names. All right. Now we need to create this table in the database. How do we create the table in the database? Again, I've done that in previously, just for sake of making the video shorter. I'm going to copy the statement that allow me to create the database, the table. So I'm going to go back to here, and then let me explain to you what we have in the helper class. Here's the onCreate, and here's my variable. So it's a string. The name of the string is a create. In it, I will have the method create, not the method, I have this string, create table. Remember that was if you go back here, that's the first command, create table. Then table name next. So I have space after this, table name. Where is the table name? The table name that I have defined here, table members. So it will have in it members. So the table name will be members plus, and if you go back in here, I have a bracket, all right? Table name, bracket, and then you put the values in it and you close the bracket at the end. So I have the bracket plus ID. So this is my first field name, ID. Then the type of that field name, the ID is going to be an integer, primary key, auto increment. So I don't generate unique keys. The SQLite engine will generate those IDs. Every time I add one, it will give you a unique ID. Then comma, the next column name. The next column name. Then you put column name, comma, comma, and the type. So now I have the next column name, which is what? Name. Notice the spaces. I leave spaces after the commas between words so you don't run into a syntax issue. So name, which is going to be name, and then it will have space, text, comma, and then the next field. Age, integer, comma, space, and then city, text, and then I'm done. I close the table. So that is how we create and construct the create statement for the table. Now, after you do this, all you need to do, we have the database. We do database dot execute SQL. And what do we pass to it? We pass to it the string that represent the SQL statement, which in this case is going to be table create. Table create, right? That's it to create the table. When does this happen? It happens when you call onCreate method. OnCreate method, it will be called once in your application. When you reference get writable, get readable database, and we're gonna do that in the next part here. So in this case, all we did is we created the table and into the database that is called members or members DB. All right. Okay, let me pause for a minute and answer any questions. Okay, so we've created the table. What do we do next? What do we do next is to actually look at the PowerPoint again and start doing perform CRUD operation, which is the first thing that we're going to do. We're going to insert the information on the screen into the database. How do we do that? In the helper class, we usually have other methods that performs database operation. So I'm going to create a method, create a method that add members to the database. Okay. Members. All right. And we're gonna call this method public. I'm gonna make it Boolean, and I'll show you what that why. And I'm gonna say add member. And this method is gonna receive the actual class member, the model that we've created, member, and I'm gonna call it M. And right now, I'm gonna, because it's Boolean, I will return true for now, okay? And I'll show you why we do that later on. So what are we doing in this one? We're going to call this function whenever we want to add a member. Where do we do that? We do that in the main activity class. Remember, in the main activity, I've created my helper. Now, what do I need to do? I need to call the method that allow me to add the user to the database, or to the member to the database, which is in this case is going to be my helper dot add member and pass to it the object that we've created above. So I'm going to put M in here. Okay, right now we're not doing anything. Okay, so where do we add, how do we add information to the database. We need to go back to the myHelper class and then start writing the code. There are 3 steps that we have to do, maybe more. First step, get reference to the database. Okay, that's the first step. The next step is to do what? The next step to do is to construct the values. We want to insert. The next step, the last step is actually, or the third step is to do what? Issue the insert command using the values above. Okay. And then the last thing we usually just to do cleanup. The last thing we do, we say we close the database. So if somebody else is accessing it, it does not causes issues. All right, close the database. So those are the things that we're going to do in an insert. Typically, this is what you do in when you're adding anything to the database. So get reference to the database. There are 2 ways to get reference to the database. There is one method is called SQLite database. Sorry, SQLite database db equal this dot get 2 do you see those? Those are important ones. You say get readable database and get writable database. The get writable database allows you what? To add and update your database. And it locks the database and the records you're accessing. Get readable database, it doesn't lock anything, but it allows you to read from the database. So if I'm just reading from the database, I use get readable database. If I want to update and update the database or add to the database, then I will use get writable. Since we are writing to the database, I will use get writable here. When you do this, it will actually call this onCreate method. Before you do this, if you don't do this, it will never call this onCreate method. So once you do this part, it's going to call this method. And if the database is not created, it will create the database and the table inside of it. Is that clear? So when does this get created? Called when you do get writable or get readable to the database. So we've done that part. The next part is kind of, if you come from an SQL background, this is kind of foreign to you, but it's okay. It'll make things easier. So what do? We create what we call content value. Contents value. And then you say new content values. What is the purpose of this content value? This purpose of this content value, you set the field with its value or the column with its value. We have 3 fields here, the name, the age, and the city. The ID is going to be auto increment, so we don't have to worry about it. So now what do? I say CV dot put. What do I put? I put the field name and its value. So I have my field names above. Notice why did we create this? I have the name, the age, and the city. So I can put name, and then what? Comma, what? The object that I've received, in this case, M. Then inside of it, we have a getter and setter method. We will say get name. All right. So that is the first field and its value. Then what do? I do the same thing for the remaining fields. So I say CV dot put again what? Again put name, city, and then its value. And it comes from the object, which is get city. And the last thing I do CV dot get put age, and then comma dot get age from the class. All right. So there is no more information to add to that we want to insert into the database. So got the reference to the database, got the content to the database. Now I issue the insert statement. The insert statement, if you look at the documentation in SQLite, you'll see this thing is in my face. Hold on. So if I say SQLite insert statement, if you look at the insert into statement, this is not the documentation that I want. SQLite tutorial. I don't want the tutorial. I want the actual organization. Okay, the reference. My God. But basically, what I'm trying to tell you, the insert statement, it actually return a value, and this value it will be either it will have anyway insert. It will give you a value. If it's a negative value, then it means what? The insert did not work. If it's a positive value, then the insert has actually worked. All right? But we will not worry about this for now. We'll come back to it later on. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to say db.insert, and then pass to it what? Pass to it 3 parameters. واحدة من string, the table name, null column hack. What does that mean? Basically, are you going to allow empty columns or not? And you need to provide values for them. So we're going to say, no, can be null. So I'm going to make it null. We're not inserting empty columns. And the content value, the last content value. So if I do this, first we'll put the table name. What is the table name? From above, right? Remember, we called it here. We called it a name. It's called TBL members. Okay, so I will say TBL members, comma, null, comma, the content value that we've created above. Okay. All right. So it will say here, wait a minute, give me an error here. Do you introduce this variable? Why? Because this returns, as I told you, it returns a value. So I'm going to say insert, yes, sure. It will give me a value. This value will be either, it's either going to be negative or positive. If it is negative, it means what? It will be the insert statement did not work. If it's a positive, the insert statement did work. All right. So we're ready. The last thing we need to do what? We need to close the database. So we'll say db.close, and then we are ready to test. So from the main activity, we created the model. We got the data. We created the model. We created the helper class, my helper class, and then we called my helper class to add the member. And let's put it in debug to see if it actually works. So I'm going to put it in here, and see what happens. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to also put a debug in here in the onCreate to show you what actually happens. All right. So let's go ahead and run it, debug it. Choose, okay. Let me pause, make sure it takes time to do that. Okay, so let's test it. So I'm going to put some values here. It doesn't matter, this one we said. I'm gonna put my name, 33, I wish, and then, okay. And then I'm gonna do insert. All right, so this is that part that the constructor class. So, okay, we looked at that before. I'm gonna go to the next breakpoint. Here's my next breakpoint, which is what? The get writable. Now notice what happens. If I do this, if actually it skipped that part. Okay, I should have clicked on this to show you. Anyway, but you notice now you had a reference, you have a reference to the database. Here is my database. Where is it stored? It's stored in SQL database, data, user, 0, com, example, ismail application, database, members DB. And I can show you where to find this on your device in case you need it. But so if you want to look at your database, export the database, copy the database, do whatever, this is the link to your database. All right. And hopefully I'll show you, I can show you that later on. So now what we're going to do, we're going to do next, step over, step over, step over, and then step over. And now let's check this one. This is going to be the test. Did it work or did not work? So if I click on step over, let's take a look at L. L is what? Positive. That means it actually worked. All right. And the reason it works because they probably did not call this method the onCreate because I already ran it before with the same application name. That's why it never called the onCreate method. I already have the table created. But for you, if you're doing it the first time, it will actually go in here. All right. Okay. So that is okay. So we are okay. It ran okay. So now if I continue, we're back to the same. We're back to the same, to the user interface. And we can return true or false if it actually worked or not. So I can go in here in my helper class, and then at the end, I check if L is greater than 0. Well, if we just say if it's less than 0, if it's greater than 0, return true. Else, return false. Why would you use that? So you want to inform the user, did it actually work or not? So in the main activity, you can check here. You'll notice also here you have this light bulb, says introduce a local variable, B, result, whatever you want to call it. So now you can check if B is true, that means the user has, you can put a toast, you can put an alert, whatever you want to tell the user it actually worked. Yeah. So let's put a toast and see if to tell the user if it actually succeeded or not. All right, so we're going to display the result, whether the member was added in the to the table, to the database or not. So we're going to say, we're going to check if B, first we're going to define a message, string message, and it's going to be empty at the beginning. And we check if the member was added, well, then we will put member added. If the member was not added, then we will put member was not added, could not add members. So how do we do that? We check the value B. So if B means it's true, if B, because it's either true or false. So if it is true, this will be executed. We'll say message, we'll say, hooray, member added. A new member was added, a new member was added. Else, what do we say? We say message, oops, something wrong, right? Message will say, oops, something bad happened, something wrong, something, oops, we could not add the member. Not add the member for some reason. Okay, we can look at the exceptions why later on, but for now, just this is enough. Okay, and at the end, what do? We display the message to the user. So we're going to use the toast dot make text. Then we're going to provide this, the message, which is MSG, and then the parameter, which is one or toast dot length long, and then dot show. Okay, and now let's test it and see if that works. So if we click on run, we go to here, and then I put some, doesn't matter, this one again, put different name. I put my son's name. And then we will put goodbye, and then we click on ins. Before we do that, I'm gonna bring the keyboard down, and let's take a look at what happens here. When we click on this, okay, hooray, a new member was added. All right, so if we had a problem with the database, this would have not happened, okay? All right, I'm gonna show you in the next video, how do we retrieve the information and display it on the screen. All right, we're going to use the name to find the information and display it on the screen. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.